I, Chukwuemeka, take you, Chioma.
Mommy, that man looks exactly like me.
Did you hear that?
That moment changed everything. Sit down. Let me show you how it started. Adaeze Nwosu was 24 years old, living in a Face Me I Face You compound in Uwani, Enugu, when the wrong man walked into her life wearing the right smile. She wasn't looking for love. She was looking for rent money and a career. She had a BSc in accounting from UNN, a result that cost her father 2 plots of land and a 35,000 naira job at a small audit firm on Ogui Road. She was the first daughter, the responsible one, the one who gave 20,000 of her salary to her parents every month without being asked. She had a plan. She always had a plan. She just hadn't planned for Chukwuemeka. He walked into her office on a Wednesday in January, tall, blue kaftan, the kind of expensive that whispers instead of shouts. He smelled like ambition. He sat across from her desk and said, "I was told you are the best here. I don't have time for second best." She looked at him over her glasses and said, "Then sit down, you've come to the right place." He laughed, surprised, like women usually melted when he walked in. He sat down. That was his first mistake. By March, they were together. He was from Onitsha. His father owned filling stations. He drove a new Camry. He introduced her to his friends as my person and looked at her like she was something he'd been searching for. She believed him. Most women would have. But here is what Adaeze didn't know yet, what nobody told her, what she would only understand much, much later. While she was falling in love with Chukwuemeka Obi, his mother was already looking for someone else. Emeka took her to Onitsha once. His father was a short, wide man with a beard losing its arguments with grey. He looked at Adaeze the way you look at something you are deciding whether to buy. He said hello. He did not say her name. His mother, Mama Emeka, gave her food and asked about her family. When Adaeze said her father was a retired civil servant, the warmth dropped 3 degrees, just 3, but Adaeze felt it like a cold hand on her neck. She told herself she was imagining things. She was not imagining things. Because that same evening, while Adaeze was in the guest room, Mama Emeka called her son into the corridor and said words that Adaeze would only hear about 2 years later. She is a nice girl, but nice is not what this family needs. Her father has nothing. She has nothing. Emeka, you are our son. You deserve better than nothing. Emeka said nothing. He went back to the guest room. He smiled at Adaeze. He said, "My mother likes you." And Adaeze, because she loved him, because she wanted to believe, she smiled back. 1 year passed. Then 1 year and 7 months. Adaeze cooked for him on Saturdays, prayed over him at midnight, stood with him when his father's filling station caught fire and they lost 3 months of revenue. She gave him 8,000 naira from her rent savings, money she had been keeping for herself because he needed transport to Abuja for a business meeting. He came back from Abuja with a contract. He bought her a bracelet. She wore it every day. The signs came quietly. Sunday evenings, he stopped picking up her calls. Just Sunday evenings, specific, surgical. Then cancelled plans, twice in 1 week. Then his cousin Ifeanyi at a family party, congratulating him for finally agreeing. Agreeing to what? Adaeze asked in the car. Ifeanyi talks too much, Emeka said. Then the night that changed everything. His phone lit up on the bed. A message from Mama. Nde call again. Her father says they are ready. Don't keep these people waiting, my son. Adaeze put the phone face down. She lay back on the pillow. She stared at the ceiling. And she made the mistake that destroyed everything. She said nothing. If she had spoken that night, Maybe the story ends differently, but she didn't. And 3 weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, alone, staring at 2 lines on a test strip. 20 minutes she sat there. She was not afraid. That surprised her. She thought she would be afraid. Instead, she felt something between terrified and certain, like standing at the edge of a high place, not yet knowing if you fall or fly. She called Emeka. He came within the hour. He sat in her father's parlor on the plastic visitor's chair. She told him. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard in her life. Then he said, "Are you sure?" She said, "I'm sure." He said, "Okay, let me think." "Think about what, Emeka?" "Ada, you know my family. This is not the right time." "When is the right time to tell a man you are carrying his child?" He stood up. He paced. He sat back down. "Let us handle this quietly." She repeated those words slowly. Handle this quietly. Like she was tasting poison. He couldn't meet her eyes. And in that moment, in that exact, specific, irreversible moment, Adaeze Nwosu understood everything she had been refusing to understand for almost 2 years. He left that night saying he needed time. He did not call for 4 days. On the 5th day, he came back with an envelope. Inside the envelope was 200,000 naira. He placed it on the table between them and said nothing. 200,000 naira. For his child. For almost 2 years of her life. For everything she had given him. She looked at the envelope. She looked at the man she had loved. She pushed the envelope back across the table. She said, "Get out of my father's house. Ada, be reasonable. I will not kill my child and I will not take your money. Get out." He left. And while he drove back to Onitsha, while he went back to his life, his family, his plans, Adaeze Nwosu sat in her father's parlor and decided who she was going to be. But here is what nobody knew yet. Not Emeka, not his mother, not even Adaeze herself. That the child growing inside her was going to walk into a church 3 years later and dismantle everything. What they don't tell you about being a pregnant, unmarried woman in a Nigerian compound is that the compound becomes a courtroom the moment they find out. Mrs. Okonkwo in room 3 started greeting her mother with sympathy sharpened into judgment. "Ne, how are you coping?" The landlord's wife stopped lending salt. Her father didn't speak to her for 11 days. 11 days, she counted. Every single one. On the 12th morning, he called her in. He looked old in a way he hadn't looked the week before. He said, "I am not happy, Adaeze." "I know, Papa. I did not send you to school for this. I know." Then, and this is the sentence she will carry until she dies, he said, "But the child inside you did nothing wrong, and you are still my daughter. We will face whatever comes, together." She broke. He held her, and she decided right there in that room that she would not hide, she would not shrink, she would not give them the shame they were waiting for. Meanwhile, in Onitsha, Chukwuemeka Obi was choosing a wedding ring. Chukwudima Nwosu was born on a Tuesday in October. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. He came into the world screaming like he had an announcement to make. She called him Dima, God is good, not as a statement of what had happened, as a declaration of what she had decided to believe. He had Emeka's eyes, exactly Emeka's eyes. Every morning, she looked at her son and saw the man who abandoned them. Every morning, she made the choice to see her son instead. That is not a small thing. That is one of the hardest things a human being can do. She did it every single day. And every day that she did it, Emeka was somewhere in Onitsha, planning a wedding, pretending his son did not exist. She rebuilt herself from the floor. Online certifications at night after Dimma slept, 41 job applications, 11 responses, 2 offers. She negotiated her salary and the HR woman had to recalculate. She moved them into a self-contained Inachara layout, 1 room, kitchen, bathroom. She painted it yellow because Dimma said yellow was the color of the sun and he wanted to live inside the sun. She packed his school lunch every morning herself. She attended every school event alone, sports day, prize giving, Christmas concert. When other children pointed at their fathers in the crowd, Dimma pointed at his mother and said, "That's my mama, she's the tallest." She was 5'4", but to that boy, she was everything. And then, on an ordinary Thursday morning, a dispatch rider knocked on her gate with an envelope, gold lettering, her name written as Miss, not Mrs., not Doctor, just Miss. She would understand later that the Miss was intentional. The Obi and Nwosu families joyfully invite you to celebrate the holy matrimony of Chukwuemeka Obiora Obi and Ugochi Adaeze Nwosu. Saturday, 15th March, St. Michael's Catholic Church, Onitsha. She read it twice. She set it on the table. She made Dinma's breakfast. She braided his hair, walked him to the bus stop, kissed his forehead, watched the school bus disappear. She went back inside. She sat at the table. She picked up the invitation. And she gave herself 10 minutes. 10 minutes to cry. Hard, the ugly kind, the kind where your whole body participates. 10 minutes for everything she had held together for 3 years. Then she washed her face, looked in the mirror, and said to herself, "He is not crying. Do not waste more tears on someone who is not crying." She picked up her bag. She went to work. But what Adaeze didn't know yet was that this invitation was not sent by Emeka. It was sent by his mother, deliberately, personally, as a weapon. Her friend Obiagele worked at a salon in Onitsha, where the Obi women did their hair. She overheard Mama Emeka, sitting under the dryer, rollers in, voice low but carrying, say these exact words. "I want that Enugu girl to come and see what she missed. I want her to sit in that church and watch my son marry a woman of quality. Let her come and see with her own eyes that her type was never going to be our type. Let her carry the shame home." Obiagele called Adaeze that night. Adaeze listened to everything. Long silence. Then she said, "Okay. Okay, Ada, they want to disgrace you. Let them prepare the stage. God will write the performance." What does that mean? It means I'm going. She was going, but not the way they expected, because the night before the wedding, Adaeze opened her wardrobe and took out something she had been keeping for 2 years. Something sealed in a plastic bag. Something that was about to change everything. The secret weapon reveal. Tension peak. 1 year after Dinma was born, Emeka had come to her area, not to see her, to see a client nearby. He had stopped at her gate briefly. She brought him water in a cup. When he left, she did not wash the cup. She sealed it in a plastic bag. She labeled it. She put it in the back of her wardrobe. She didn't tell anyone. She just kept it, like she knew somewhere in the part of herself that knows things before the mind catches up. that the truth would one day need paper. 6 weeks before the wedding, she went to a certified laboratory in Enugu. She paid from her own money. She submitted Dinma's cheek swab and the cup. The result came back in 14 days. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Chukwuemeka Obi was Dinma's father. Certified, signed, legally admissible. She folded it carefully, put it in a white envelope, put the envelope in her clutch bag. She told nobody. Not Chisom, not her mother, nobody. She just got dressed for a wedding. And oh, how she got dressed. Deep wine-colored Ankara, tailored like it was poured onto her body. Her mother's gold earrings, the ones her mother wore the day she married her father. Hair pinned high, makeup minimal, strategic, the kind that makes you look like you woke up chosen. Chisom stood behind her when it was done. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Chisom said, "Ada, they made a mistake inviting you." Adaeze said nothing. She just picked up her clutch bag and went to get her son. Dinma wore the white Senegalese kaftan she had sewn for Christmas and saved. White cap, white shoes. He looked like a small, serious diplomat. When he saw his mother fully dressed, he stopped in the middle of the room. He stared. Then he said, "Mama, you look like a queen." She crouched to his level. She held his small face in both hands. "I need you to hold Mama's hand today and be my big boy. Can you do that?" He said very seriously, "I can do that." She kissed his forehead. She stood up. She said, "Let's go." 300 people were inside St. Michael's Catholic Church. Flowers on every pew, silk on every surface. A bride so beautiful the church seemed to hold its breath when she walked in. A groom who had spent 3 years pretending he had no son. A front row seat for Mama Emeka. And a seat near the back, deliberately, insultingly near the back, for Adaeze. They had prepared everything, except what walked through those doors at 11:47 a.m. She walked in slowly. Chisom had said, "Don't rush, let them see you arrive." She held Dinma's right hand. He walked beside her in his white kaftan. Small, serious, beautiful. The first person to notice was a young woman near the back. She turned to look at a latecomer and did not turn back. Her expression changed. The woman beside her followed her gaze, then the man beside her. Row by row, pew by pew, the turning of heads, the human body's involuntary response to something it knows is significant. By the middle of the church, a third of the congregation watching. By her seat at the back, the entire right side. A man looked from Adaeze's face to Dinma's face and stayed on Dinma's face for a long time. In the front row, someone touched Mama Emeka's arm and pointed toward the back. Mama Emeka turned around. She looked at Adaeze, then her eyes dropped to the child, and the color left her face. Not dramatically, in the quiet, devastating way that truth removes things that were never meant to be there. She turned to her husband. He turned. He looked at Dinma. He looked for a long time. Then he gripped the bench in front of him. In the vestry, someone ran to find the groom. Emeka went very still when he heard. He didn't speak for almost a minute. He walked to the vestry window and stood with his back to his groomsmen. Then he said quietly, "How did she come?" "She drove. Emeka, is she alone?" Long silence. "No, she brought the boy." Another silence. "Does he look like Emeka?" Just his name, that was enough. He put his hand against the wall. He stood there. Then he straightened his agbada. He said, "Let's go. It's time." Nobody in that vestry could look at each other. The ceremony began. The priest spoke about covenant, about love that chooses every day. Adaeze listened to every word. Dinma found a hymn book and turned pages quietly. Ugochi walked down that aisle and she was breathtaking. Her dress, her gele, her composure. She had been told her whole life she deserved exactly this. She just didn't know yet what she was walking into. The vows began. Father Dominic said, "I, Chukwuemeka, take you, Ugochi, to be my lawfully wedded wife." That was when Dima stood up on the bench. Children do this. They stand to see better. He stood. He looked at the man at the altar in white and gold. He studied him, the way children study things that confuse them. And in the absolute silence of the vow exchange, in the held breath of 300 witnesses, he said, "Mama, that man looks like me." 300 people heard it. 300 people turned. The priest stopped mid-sentence. The bride turned from the altar. And Chukwuemeka Obi, 2 sentences from the most important promise of his life, closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Just long enough for everyone to understand. Chaos in a church full of Nigerians has a very specific texture. It starts as current, rapid, quiet electricity, person to person, row to row. Then it sounds like wind, then water, then everything at once. Mama Emeka rose from the front row. She turned toward the back. Her voice, stripped of all its earlier triumph, said, "Adaeze, what is this?" The question was absurd. Everyone could see what it was. It was the last reflex of a woman who had spent years controlling narratives and could not accept that this one had left her hands entirely. Adaeze stood up. She picked up Dima and placed him on her hip. She smoothened her wrapper. She said, in a clear, even voice that carried to every corner of St. Michael's Catholic Church, "You sent me an invitation, Mama Emeka. I accepted it. I am a guest at this wedding. I have done nothing wrong." 3 rows back, a woman started crying, not from sadness, from the specific overwhelm of watching someone refuse to be small. Ugochi's father rose from his seat, a large man in deep blue agbada, the kind of man accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room. He said one word, "Emeka." Not a request. Emeka stepped away from the altar, walked toward Ugochi's father. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. Nobody could hear it, but everyone could see it. They could see Emeka's posture collapse, the way a man looks when everything he built on lies falls in real time. They could see Ugochi's father cycle through confusion, disbelief, and then the cold, settling fury of a man who has been publicly disrespected. When it ended, Ugochi's father turned to his daughter. 2 words in Igbo. "Anyị ga-aga," we are leaving. Ugochi looked at Emeka. He could not look back. She handed her bouquet to her maid of honor, carefully, like it still mattered how things were handled, like dignity was something you kept for yourself, not for the audience. She walked down the aisle. Her family followed, then her friends, then her father's associates, then people who had simply decided they would not be associated with this afternoon. 47 people walked out of St. Michael's Catholic Church. The doors swung open, letting the March sunlight swung closed. And the wedding was over. What remained? A groom at an empty altar, a church full of people with no wedding to witness, a priest holding a book, head bowed, a mother in the front row whose plan had destroyed her son's wedding, her family's reputation, and her own. And Adaeze, standing at the back, holding her son, heart steady. Emeka walked up the aisle, slowly. His groomsmen moved to follow. He held up his hand without turning. They stopped. He walked until he stood in front of her. She did not step back. He looked at her, then at Dema. Dema looked back at him with the uncomplicated directness of a child who doesn't yet know how to pretend. Emeka said, "Is he?" She said, "You know he is." Something moved across his face. Large, unnamed, too late. "Ada, I don't." Quietly, not with rage. With the finality of a woman who has already processed everything he was about to say and decided it didn't require her response. She reached into her clutch bag. She took out the white envelope. She held it out. He took it. He opened it. He read it. His hands went very still, the way hands go still in shock, not shaking, just stopping. The DNA result, 99.97. His name, his son, certified, signed, in front of what remained of 300 witnesses. She said nothing else. She didn't need to. God had already said everything. Adaeze did not stay for what came next. She had not come for drama. She had come because they told her to sit at the back and be humiliated. And she had decided to come, but on her own terms, carrying her truth, leaving the consequences in God's hands. She buttoned Dinma's collar, took his hand, walked out into the March sunlight. Chisom was outside with the car running. She got in. Chisom drove without a word. After 5 minutes, Dinma said, "Mama, are we going home?" "Yes, my love." That church had very nice windows. It did. The man at the front looked sad. I know. He fell asleep 10 minutes later, curled against her side, his face peaceful, white kaftan still perfect. What happened after became the kind of story Nigerian families tell for years. Ogochi's family returned the bride price within 2 weeks, all of it, in full, with a lawyer's letter that the Obi family's lawyer later described as surgical. 300 people were in that church. 300 people had phones. By Sunday evening, the story was in every WhatsApp group in Onitsha. By Monday, it had reached Enugu, Nnewi, Akwa, and was heading for Lagos. Emeka's father did not speak to him for 2 months. From a man who had built his son's entire life, 2 months of silence is its own kind of sentence. Emeka Omma, the architect of the invitation, fell sick 3 weeks later. The doctor said stress, high blood pressure, the kind that comes from carrying a weight you built yourself. The compound in Nkwo talked, but not what she had planned. They weren't saying, "Look at that shameless Enugu girl." They were saying, God showed up in that church. 3 years she raised that child alone while he planned a wedding. Did you see how she stood? Did you see her face? Emeka came to Enugu on a Tuesday evening, alone, no family, no gifts. He stood at her gate. She did not open it. She spoke through the iron bars. "Adai, I made the worst mistake of my life." "Which one?" He had no answer. "I want to be in my son's life. I want to do right." "What you want is no longer the most important thing in this story, Emeka." "I know." She said, "If you want to be in Dinma's life, that conversation goes through a lawyer, not through my gate on a Tuesday evening. You will pay for his school, his health. You will show up on schedule, not when guilt gets heavy, but consistently, like a father. And you will never again make a decision about this child based on what your mother thinks." She was not shouting. She was not crying. Just truth in a voice that left no room. Emeka said, "Okay." She said, "Go home. Call a lawyer." She went inside. 2 years after the church, Adaeze Nwosu, 30 years old, senior head of internal audit, youngest in her company's history, received her promotion letter on a Wednesday afternoon. She called her father. He said nothing for a while. Then, come home this weekend. She went. He was sitting in his chair in the Owani compound, the same chair he'd received visitors in, the same chair Emeka had sat in with the envelope. He said, "Come here." He held her for a long time. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The bracelet Emeka gave her, the one she wore every day for 2 years, she had taken it off the morning she walked out of St. Michael's. She placed it in a small box in the back of her wardrobe. Not because she hated it, because she had decided it was the last thing she would carry for a man who did not carry her. Emeka paid, every month, on the 1st, consistent as she had demanded, like a man finally understanding what consistency costs when it arrives too late. Dima was 5 now, in primary school. He had recently discovered he could make adults laugh on purpose. He was deploying this like someone who had found a superpower. His current life ambition was to become an astronaut and a chef, because space will make me hungry, Mama. She laughed every time he said it, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere full. On a Sunday, after service at her family church in Owani, old Pastor Nwachukwu, who had known her since she was 7 years old, stopped her in the courtyard. He said, "Adaeze, I have been watching you for 5 years." He said, "What you carried and how you carried it, the way you refused to make them ashamed of what God placed in your arms, I want you to know that there is a reward for that kind of faithfulness. Not because life is fair, but because God is a God who sees." She thought about her father. The child inside you did nothing wrong. She thought about a 3-year-old boy standing on a church bench. She thought about herself at a gate on a Tuesday evening, not shaking, telling the truth in a voice that left no room. She said, "Thank you, Pastor." He shook Dima's hand formally, the way old men greet small boys when they mean to say, "I see you, you will be something." Dima shook back with enormous seriousness. They walked to the car. Dima said, "Mama, is God actually watching everything?" She said, "Everything." He thought about this. "Even when I eat the biscuit I'm not supposed to eat?" "Especially then." She laughed. She buckled him in. She started the car. She drove home.